Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and welcome back to the NFL edition of Ron's Rundown. We're going to go over the Sunday games and Monday Night Football in the NFL for Week 2. If you like what you see, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Put your NFL picks in the comments section below. And if you're looking for my best bets in the NFL, college football, Major League Baseball, you name it, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. There's also a link in the description. Alrighty, here we go. Here are the games for Week 2 in the NFL. First up, the New Orleans Saints taking on the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to see the Cowboys as a 6-point favorite. The total is at 46 points. Now, this is already one of the tougher games on the board, in my opinion, because both of these teams look so strong in their Week 1 performances. Of course, the Saints earned the blowout win over Carolina, 47-10. But the Cowboys also, they went on the road against one of the best defensive teams in the league last year in the Cleveland Browns and put up 33 points in a 16-point win, 33-17. Outstanding performances from both of these teams. For me, while it's not easy going against either club after their strong performances, I think the Cowboys are the better team by a sizable margin. I like the fact that they're playing in their home opener, Saints playing in their first road game of the season. Dallas, the concern for me would be the run defense. While it's held Cleveland to under 100 rushing yards, it was 4.9 yards per carry. The Browns were kind of forced to throw the ball a lot in that game because they were down big early, 45 pass attempts for Watson by the end of that game. But if the Saints ran all over Carolina in that Week 1 game. Kamara had a big day. They had 180 rushing yards. If the Saints are able to get that running game going early, it could be a tough day for the Dallas defense, but that secondary was excellent. We still know they have one of the best pass rushes, led by Micah Parsons in the NFL. So I think the Cowboys have a strong defensive showing, and their offense didn't really need to do too much against Cleveland in that first game. You look at the total yards, only 265, but they had a special team score. Their defense was so strong, they really didn't need to open it up at all, but you still have one of the more potent offenses in the NFL. Great offensive line play. Prescott and CeeDee Lamb now have their contracts, so they're ready to go. I think the Cowboys just too much in this game. I got to go with the Cowboys, lay the 6 points. Next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Detroit Lions. We're going to see the Lions as a 7.5 point favorite. Total is right now at 51.5 points, so one of the steepest totals of the week. For me, I like the Lions big in this game. And I know, I mentioned I like the Bucs win total under 7.5. They look strong in Week 1 with a blowout win over Washington. But I'll mention the same thing I mentioned, from last year. This team does play a little bit unsustainable for my liking on offense. The fact that Baker Mayfield and this Bucs offense was 9 of 13, right around 70% on third down in that game against Washington. Last year the Buffalo Bills was the league's best third down team, and they converted about 49% of the time, nowhere near 70%. So I just don't think the Bucs are going to be able to get that luck on their side for an entire 17-game season. They also didn't run the ball very well, 3.7 yards per carry. So I think their offense takes a big step back in this game and going forward. The defense played well, but Washington, a rookie quarterback on the road in his NFL debut, still put up right around 300 yards total offense. They had 22 first downs, and really the Washington Commanders did not lose that game because of their offense. It was because their defense and their secondary was getting torched in that one. But I think the Lions are a much better team defensively. We know their offense is strong, one of the best offensive lines in football. Great running back group with Montgomery and Gibbs. The receivers, Laporta at tight end. This is a great offense, one of the best in the league. So they could go score for score if they needed to against Tampa Bay, but I don't think they will. I think this is going to be a one-sided game, and I think the line tells you all you need to know. Give me Detroit laying the points in this one. Next up, the Colts and the Packers. We're going to see the Colts as a 3-point favorite. The total is at 40.5 points. I love backup quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think this is one of the classic overreactions we're going to see from the market this season and from Week 1 to Week 2. Jordan Love goes down with the injury. It's definitely unfortunate. Malik Willis comes into that game against the Eagles on Friday. Did not look good in those last couple of plays to try to win it, but nonetheless, the Green Bay Packers opened up as a 4.5 point favorite in this game. This line's now moved to Indy -3. That's a 7.5 point line move through 0. I think that's a huge overreaction. I know Malik Willis has not had a lot of success at the NFL level. I don't think he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, but you've also got over a week to prepare with Matt LaFleur, who's an offensive guru, a quarterback's coach, in his former positions. I think that Willis will be fine. I think he'll be serviceable. Like I said, I don't think he takes over this game or makes a big difference. But you got Josh Jacobs, who had a great debut with Green Bay, a solid offensive line, ton of weapons in the receiving game, and a solid Green Bay defense. Now that defense did fold a little bit down the stretch in that game in Brazil, but I still think that the Indianapolis Colts while they played well against Houston, they still, fell short in that game. The defense was not great at times. And you look at their run defense, I mean, they gave up a ton of rushing yards, 213 on the ground and 5.3 yards per carry to Joe Mixon, who is a solid running back, but he's getting up there in age. You got Josh Jacobs, who had an amazing debut, like we said. I think Green Bay's going to be able to run the football in this game. And like I said, the overreaction, the market move, too much for me. Give me that backup quarterback. I'll take the points with the Green Bay Packers. Next up, we see the New York Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans. We're going to see the Jets as a 3.5-point favorite. Total is at 40.5 points. This is a tough one because we know both teams had some pretty disappointing results in Week 1. The Titans had a 17-0 lead. They blew it, and it wasn't because of their defense. They made a few key mistakes offensively. Will Levis's pick six, the most notable one, to lose that game 24-17. The offense ran the ball well, but the passing game was just not there, and we know Levis struggled in that one, only hitting for 127 yards, 19 of 32 passing with 2 picks in that one. I think the Jets defense was also disappointing in Week 1. I mean, the Niners have a great offense. They got Williams back on the offensive line. We still expected them to move the ball, but the Jets gave up right around 5 yards per carry. The passing, the secondary also wasn't really much better. 32 points and 400 total yards. I mean, the Jets defense last year was very strong. Robert Saleh, a defensive mind, but it was disappointing in Week 1. I think they bounced back here, though. I think it's a much more favorable matchup. And honestly, Aaron Rodgers, while the numbers on paper don't look the best from that game, I thought he actually played fine. I mean, he was a couple of mistakes. The interception, the 4th down play to Garrett Wilson, pretty bad throw on that one. But outside of those plays, I thought Rodgers looked fine. I think Breece Hall gets going here on the ground. And, that was a disappointing result as well for the Jets. Their run game, which just wasn't effective. But it's a much better matchup here. You're not playing in San Francisco against the Niners. You're playing against the Titans. I think the Jets bounce back. And because of their lackluster performance, we're getting actually a pretty good price with the Jets. So give me the Jets laying the 3.5 points. Next up, we see the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to see the 49ers as a 5.5, 6-point favorite. Total is right now at 45.5 points. Interesting matchup here because you got another game with two teams that played very well in Week 1. The Niners we just talked about on Monday Night Football. The Vikings with the 28-6 blowout win in MetLife against the Giants. Now, the Vikings defense looked really strong in that game, and this was a defense that going into the season, I heard a lot of people excited about, and for good reason so far. I mean, only giving up 220 total yards, 3.5 yards per carry. They had 5 sacks in that one as well. The question is, how much of that success was the Vikings defense improving, and how much was it facing the New York Giants, who have been one of the worst offensive teams in the last few years? I think it's a little bit of both, though, but I still think the Vikings defense shows up in this game. The key is they have to be able to stop the run like they did against New York. They held them to 3.5 yards per carry. If you're able to keep San Francisco under 4 yards per carry in this one, you give yourself a much better chance because Jordan Mason, Christian McCaffrey has been ruled out, or I think he's doubtful right now for this game. Jordan Mason took over and didn't miss a beat. I mean, he's still a very talented running back. This is still a very strong offensive line. If the Vikings can force Brock Purdy to make some tough throws, I think they'll have some luck. I mean, Brock Purdy played well in that game against the Jets, but he also missed a few open receivers, a couple of questionable throws in that one. I'm still not sold on him being one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and this is also a very tough environment in the Dome. The Vikings have one of the best home field advantages in the NFL. The offense I'm still not in love with. I'm not in love with Sam Darnold, that quarterback, but he was serviceable. That's exactly what he needs to be, this season for the Vikings if they're going to rely on that defense, rely on that ground game. I think this is just too many points with the Niners on the road. We know they played so well on Monday night, but it's a short week here in a tough place. Your first road game of the season. I'm going to go with the Vikings plus the points at home. Next up, the Seattle Seahawks taking on the New England Patriots. We're going to see the Seahawks as a 3.5-point favorite, and the total is pretty low right now at 38.5 points, and it's low for a reason. I mean, the Seahawks defense has been strong the last couple of years, and we know the Patriots, while they earned that victory over Cincinnati, they still only scored 16 points, and I still think this is the worst offensive line in the NFL and one of the weakest offenses in the league as well. I think this is also a little bit of a letdown spot for New England. That was a big-time upset win. I mean, the Patriots were the biggest dog in terms of the spread this Week 1, and they earned the outright W, 16-10. That defense played very well. Joe Burrow did not do much in the passing game. In Cincinnati, while they had 4.4 yards per carry, it was only 70 rushing yards. So Patriots defense definitely showed up, but the offense I still think has its. I have a lot of concerns with that offense. I think the Seahawks defense does not give up much in this game. And honestly, Seattle, I thought their offense looked really strong in the second half of that game against Denver. They had a really good chance of covering the spread late in that game gave up a little bit of a garbage time touchdown for a push or even a loss if you had 6.5. But I still think the Seattle's much better team here, and we're actually getting a pretty good price because of that Patriots upset win. So give me the Seahawks laying the points. Next up, the New York Football Giants taking on the Washington Commanders. We're going to see the Commanders as a small favorite. Total is at 43.5 points. Now, the Giants looked miserable in Week 1 against the Vikings, but this is a Giants team. It's had pretty good success against the Commanders in recent years. I mean, it's been one of the teams that they've just dominated, really, in the last, I would say 5 seasons plus. We saw last year in the season series a 14-7 and a 31-19 win for the Giants. They swept the season series again. And, I think there's a reason why the Commanders are only a 1.5-point favorite at home in this game. For me, I'm staying away from the side. I think it's kind of a coin flip game in terms of who's going to win it. Maybe I would lean towards New York, but I think the over is the better play. The Giants' offense, we know, has not been great, but the Commanders could have the weakest secondary in the NFL. I think this is a spot that Daniel Jones, I think it's a good breakout spot for him to have a big day and for the Giants' offense to get going. I'm also still not in love with the Giant defense. I thought it was improved on paper going into the season, but I didn't really like what I saw from them in that game against the Vikings. And actually, Daniels looked like one of the more impressive rookie quarterbacks of the week. Even though his team lost, against Tampa Bay in a blowout, he made some plays. He was 70% passing. He had some, few running plays as well, a rushing touchdown, and they had 22 first downs. So they were able to move the ball quite well. I think this total is way too low. So give me the over in Giants Commanders. Next up, we see the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Carolina Panthers. We see the Chargers as a 6-point favorite. Total is at 39.5 points. Had to put the new head on because I know this is not going to be the most popular play. The Panthers had one of the worst Week 1 performances we've seen in recent memory, and the Chargers earned a nice blowout win over their rivals, 22-10. But for me, we've seen this plenty of times in the NFL. Big-time overreactions to Week 1 performances or just performances in general from both teams. I think we're getting a ton of value with Carolina in this game because of it. Now, the Panthers last year were the worst team in the NFL. They only won 2 games, but both of those wins were at home. And of their 8 home games, only 3 of them were decided by more than 1 score. So Carolina was definitely more competitive at home. On the flip side, the Chargers were not the best road team. They only won 3 road games last year, and only one of those road games by more than 1 score in the blowout win over the Jets. Other than that, we saw them lose to teams like Denver, the Raiders in an absolute blowout, and even against the Patriots in one of their road wins, 6-0 the final score. So the Chargers are not a team I'm looking to lay a lot of points with right now on the road either. Carolina, I think the big reason why their defense struggled, or one of the big reasons, was because the offense couldn't do anything. The defense was forced to be on the field so much in that first half, and any defense is going to crumble in that kind of situation. I do think, though, in the second half of that game, Carolina, while it still was ugly, started to show some positive signs, a little bit of positive signs offensively with the offensive-minded head coach. I think the Carolina Panthers are going to be stronger offensively in this game, and I think this is going to be a close one. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Panthers win it outright. Like I said, not going to be the most popular play. I don't blame you for going the other way if you want to, but give me the points with the Carolina Panthers at home. Next up, the Cleveland Browns taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This one's also going to be 1 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on CBS, and the Jags are a 3-point favorite. The total is at 41.5 points. To me, this is one of the tougher games on the board in terms of the side. We know that the Jaguars, they had a big lead. They blew it. A few key mistakes, fumbling the ball in the red zone, the going for it on your own 30-yard line, 4th and 1. Just the 80-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill. A lot of key, big plays that went against them. But they still, I would say, overall played pretty well. On the other side, the Browns did not play well in their first game against the Cowboys. The offense was the big reason. Deshaun Watson really struggled with his quarterback play, and that was a concern going into the year. We expected that the Browns' offensive line would be there, their running game would be there, their defense would be okay, it would be fine. But if Deshaun Watson cannot make the necessary throws, he was only 24 of 45, 53% in that game with 2 interceptions. The passing game did not do anything in that one. And, going forward, it's tough to trust this offense until we see Watson start to get going. He's got plenty of weapons. Jerry Jeudy, you bring in, obviously, Amari Cooper's still there, one of the better tight ends in the league, and David Njoku. But, Watson has struggled. That's why I like the under in this game. I just don't think, like I said, I don't trust this Browns offense right now. The Jaguars actually had a pretty good defensive game plan against a pretty potent team in Miami. But the offensive side of things, Jaguars didn't do too much in the second half of that game. So for that reason, I think that this total is pretty low for good reason, and I like the under in Browns-Jags. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Baltimore Ravens. We got the Ravens as an 8.5, 9-point favorite. Total is at 41.5 points. Now, the Ravens are one of those teams that in the right situation, similar to the Buffalo Bills, I'm willing to lay more than a touchdown with Baltimore because this is a team that's shown it's definitely down for a blowout win. I mean, last year, 8 of their regular season wins and their one postseason win were by more than one score. They definitely earned some blowouts, 55-19, 33-19 over the Niners, 38-6. So, they had some big wins, lopsided wins. I think this could be one of those games. I thought the Raiders played better than the final score may suggest in that game against the Chargers, but the defense still has a lot of concerns for me. They give up a lot of big-time plays, bomb plays, especially on the ground, 6.5 yards per carry. The Ravens are known to run the football very well. Derrick Henry didn't have the most explosive debut with his new team, but we know Lamar Jackson can certainly take over. He had 7.6 yards per attempt himself. So while the Ravens fell short against KC, I actually thought they played pretty well in that game. 452 total yards. They ran the ball well, like we said. The passing game was okay, but the run defense was excellent. I'm going to roll the Ravens in this one and lay the points at home. Next up, we see the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to see the Cardinals now as a 1-point favorite, and the total is at 48.5 points. This is one of the steeper totals of the week, and I think for good reason. I like the over in this game. And, I got to mention that the home team has not fared too well in this series recently, as they've lost 5 of the last 6, but the over has gone, and the game has gone over in 4 of the last 6, and I just think when the Cardinals, I mentioned their defense on paper looks to be the weakest in the NFL. It gave up 34 points in the first game against Buffalo. And honestly, I thought fared a little bit better than I expected against Buffalo. But I still don't really trust it going forward against, a Rams team that may be without Puka Nacua, but still has a very potent offense. Cooper Kupp showed what, he looked like vintage Cooper Kupp in that last game against the Lions. A ton of, receptions, a receiving touchdown, 14 catches on 21 targets for 110 yards. I mean, definitely Matthew Stafford's favorite target, and now with Nacua out, you could expect plenty of fantasy points if you got Cooper Kupp on your team. But I also didn't love what I saw from the Rams defense. I mean, they gave up 5 yards per carry. Now, granted, it was against the Lions team that is very strong offensively. But I think the Cardinals also showed in that game against Buffalo they're going to be able to move the ball well this season. I didn't even think it was Kyler Murray's best game, but for him and the Cardinals team to still put up 28 points, one, was a special team score, but still, Marvin Harrison didn't even do anything in that game, and they still had a successful day offensively. I think we see a high-scoring game where both teams, I think it could be a back-and-forth shootout. Give me the over in Rams-Cardinals. Next up, the Denver Broncos hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to see the Steelers as a 2.5-point favorite. Total is at 36.5 points. This is a tough one for me because obviously the total has gone down 4 points since the opening number at 40.5, and for good reason. When you look at the team's performances in Week 1 offensively, didn't do too much. I mean, the Steelers, while they won that game, didn't even score a touchdown in that one, 18-10 with 6 field goals. But nonetheless, I think when you look at the Broncos and Bo Nix in his debut, he struggled. It was on the road against a good defense in a tough environment, but also the fact that he wasn't able to go downfield much at all. He had 26 completions for only 138 yards. That's only 3.3 yards per attempt through the air. And when he went a couple opportunities downfield, we saw the Seahawks pick him off a couple of times. So I just think that this offense could be a little bit too one-dimensional, and that one dimension, the running game, is not even that great to begin with. The offensive line did not hold up too well in that game against the Seahawks. We saw a couple of sacks given up and only 13 first downs. The defense also started to get crushed towards the end of that game. Seattle was able to move the ball quite well. So while Justin Fields did not look great in the passing game himself, he still was excellent on the ground, and the Steelers were able to find those situational scores. Their defense was excellent as well. I think the Steelers win this game in kind of a ugly, low-scoring defensive battle, similar to what we saw from them last week in Atlanta. So I'll take the Steelers and lay the field goal, less than a field goal, on the road. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. This is going to be the game of the week for a lot of people. It's going to be a 4:25 Eastern start time on CBS, and the Chiefs are a 5.5-point favorite. Total is at 47.5 points. Now, we expected the Chiefs to be a pretty sizable favorite at home after that Week 1 performance from Cincinnati, losing outright against the New England Patriots, 16-10, and an ugly showing offensively. But I think this line's moved too much in the Chiefs' direction, and I think we're getting more than a field goal, more than 4 points. I think there's value with Cincinnati in this game. Kansas City definitely put together a strong performance against Baltimore, but we also mentioned that the Ravens moved the ball very well in that game. 25 first downs and 450 total yards. Those are two of the most in terms of all the teams in Week 1. So that Chiefs defense wasn't the sharpest in that game. The offense, we know Patrick Mahomes and a ton of weapons. It's going to be strong, and they're going to be able to put up plenty of points in this game. The question is, can Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow get on the same page here? I know T. Higgins looks doubtful for this game again, so that's definitely a big loss, but I think Joe Burrow bounces back. This has been a great rivalry the last couple of years. They've met in the playoffs. They've met in the regular season. They've been very exciting games. The Bengals are playing with revenge. They lost to KC last year in the regular season, 25-17, but that wasn't necessarily the most, the biggest rivalry game between these two because that was when Joe Burrow was out. I still think, though, that the Bengals have enough here. Defensively, I thought they played well against New England. Can their offense get going? I believe in Joe Burrow at quarterback. I think Chase now, we got to remember, he was holding out with the contract for the longest time. He only had a couple of days of practice. Most of those were limited, and we didn't expect him to do too much in that week 1 game. Now with a full week of practice, I think that the offense is much sharper. Give me the Bengals plus the points and a sprinkle on the money line in this one. Next up is the Sunday Night Football contest on NBC at 8:20 Eastern. The Chicago Bears and the Houston Texans. Texans are a 6-point favorite, and the total is at 45.5 points. These teams are both coming off emotional victories in Week 1. The Texans took down their division rivals on the road in a close game. The Bears earned that big-time comeback victory, a miracle comeback. They were down 17-0. They win it 24-17. For me, Caleb Williams had one of the weaker performances of the rookie quarterbacks in Week 1 in his debut, and that was at home. Now you're on the road against an improved defense from the Houston Texans. I think this is a tough spot for the rookie, and while the defense played well at times, they still gave up 5.4 yards per carry on the ground at Tennessee. The Texans, we just talked about not too long ago, ran the ball all over Indianapolis in that game. Joe Mixon put up 159 rushing yards on 30 attempts. They really ran the ball a ton in that game, and in general had a ton of plays in that game. 417 total yards and 26 first downs. I think the Texans' offense is too much for Chicago in the end. I'm going to lay the points with the home team in this one. And the final game we're going to talk about for the Week 2 card in the NFL is the Monday Night Football contest on ESPN, the Atlanta Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are a 6.5-point favorite, and the total is at 47.5 points. For me, I think this is another situation where we're seeing the market overreact a little bit too much to Week 1's performances. Falcons looked ugly offensively, only putting up 10 points. Kirk Cousins, a couple of interceptions. They really didn't get much going offensively in that game. The Eagles, nice win against the Packers. They were down early. They made a couple of mistakes early. They were able to hold the Packers to a couple of field goals early in that game and went on to win that one 34-29. But I still think that the Eagles defense, giving up a ton on the ground in that game. You're facing a Falcons team that has one of the best running backs in the NFL in Bijan Robinson. I think the Falcons are much sharper offensively in this game, and I'm not ready to give up on Kirk Cousins after one poor performance in a new system. He's still a very solid veteran quarterback option for Atlanta. The defense, I thought, played well for the Falcons. They didn't give up a single touchdown in that game. Only 3.3 yards per carry on the ground and not much in the passing game either. They were just -3 in the turnover battle. It's tough to win games when you're down 3 in the turnover battle. Philadelphia also was a little bit unfortunate in the turnover game as well. But I still think that the Falcons can at least cover this number as getting now more than 6 points on the road. I think it's going to be a close game, closer than what the spread suggests. So give me the Falcons plus the points. I'd sprinkle a little bit on the money line as well, but should be a great game. And that's it. Those are the games for Week 2 of the NFL season. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and put those football picks in the comment section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pick Dawgz Premium. As always, this is Ron Romanelli. Good luck.